Well, welcome in everyone. It's 3 minutes past the hour, so we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining tonight's event. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Chris Goodnow. I'm the VP of Programming for AMA Boston, and I'll be your host for tonight's event. And as you can see on the screen here, I'm joined by our awesome panelists who we're going to be hearing from shortly. But before we do, just wanted to go over a few housekeeping things with you all. And tonight's agenda, so we're going to just kick it off with the fireside chat after I'm done giving my spiel here, and then we'll leave some time at the end for questions and open discussion. So in the meantime, we're going to ask that you guys please keep your mics muted throughout the duration of the fireside chat. If you do have any questions, feel free to just drop those in the chat. We have one of our team members that's going to be fielding the chat throughout the conversation, and we'll voice those questions at the end. We'll also give you an opportunity to come off of mute and ask the panelists any questions you might have or thoughts you wanted to share as well. So please add those in the chat or save those for the end of the discussion tonight. The event is being recorded, so we will get this distributed out to you all in the next few days via email, so please be on the lookout for that as well. And then if you wanted to share any media, any videos, photos of tonight's event on social media, we'd love to see all of your stuff. So please do, and please use the hashtag AMA Boston so that we can find and connect with your posts. Real quick, if this is your first event at AMA Boston, your first time being with us, welcome. Thanks for being here. A little bit about us. We are the networking and educational hub for all New England marketers. We cover the entire New England region, not just the Boston area. So we have a large community that we market and connect with. If you're wondering about how you could get involved with AMA Boston a bit more, one way is through volunteering. We have a lot of volunteer opportunities across all of our teams in our chapter. Maybe you're looking to just build a new skill. Maybe you want to just connect with like-minded marketers. Volunteering is a great way to get involved. So if you are interested in learning more about those opportunities, feel free to connect with myself or one of the board members that's on the call this evening. They'll be introducing themselves in the chat. Also, joining our chapter as a member is a great way to get involved. We have a lot of really great member benefits, things like a bunch of member-only resources on our website. We have our first actually DEI event coming up in June. We're going to be partnering with AMA Triangle and AMA Nashville for that event. It's going to be free only for members. It's a great opportunity, one, to talk about some really important topics within DEI and have an open forum for that, but also a great opportunity to connect with other AMA members across the country. So things like members only or free events for members like that is just another example of some of the member benefits that we offer. There's much more as well. So if you're interested, again, feel free to connect with myself or one of the board members that you see on the call tonight. We also have different pricing tiers for our membership rates, student rates, group rates. So feel free to check that out on our website or connect with one of us to learn a little bit more. And without further ado, I will shut up and go ahead and turn it over to our panelists tonight. We have Scott White, SVP and Principal Recruiter at Higher Minds. We have Paige Durgan, Senior Manager of Talent at EasyCater. Josh Fialki, VP Director of Talent Acquisition at Havas Media. And Tim Walsh, Founder and Managing Partner of Vetted. Guys, welcome in. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. Excited to chat with you all. Well, let's just dive right in because I know we have a lot to get to and cover, and we want to be able to get questions in as well. So, I think first question, with it being now 2+ years into COVID, the pandemic has kind of reshaped the workplace and changed the future of work forever, how we're working. We have a lot of, hybrid models are coming into place now. So Josh, wanted to start with you. What are some of the changes that you've seen in the job market since COVID began? What are some of the new, maybe, conversations you're having with employers and candidates?
Sure. So first off, hi, everybody. Great to be here. Chris, when thinking about the last 2+ years, it's almost easier probably to say what hasn't changed. There is, as I think about even a year and a half ago, kind of the beginning, the first year, we were so unsure about the duration and what the long-term changes will be. But I think really the number one greatest change is location doesn't necessarily matter anymore. I know at Havas, Havas North America, we have offices in New York, Boston, Chicago, Miami. In the past, if you worked on New York business, you sat in New York. Boston business was in Boston. And, about 2 years ago, we started really changing and hiring good talent wherever good talent was. And at that point, we wanted people to be near an office. So, that full flexibility wasn't quite fleshed out yet. So as long as somebody, who was working in around the Chicago office could come into the office, great. Now we are really focused, and I think a lot of employers are really flexibility first. So open to fully remote, and really looking at what works best for our employees. So when we're looking at the market in general, the biggest changes are, again, is that remote flexibility, but also really making sure that employees, because it's such a candidate-driven market, making sure that employees have that flexibility, and really looking at hybrid. I was with some family today. My cousin talked about going to the office 5 days a week, and he has been, and that sounded crazy to me. I can't even, right? I mean, if you think about it, how many years were we all going into the office 4 or 5 days a week? And now the idea, I was saying to the panel before we started, I'm going to the office twice next week, and that's crazy. I have like one outfit left, I think, to go into the office. So, it's really this world where if you're not in hybrid of some sort, you're not necessarily keeping up with the Joneses. So, I think as we continue to move forward, it's always going to be about that flexibility first, and making sure that employees feel, like they can continue this sort of hybrid, work style, and again, focus on that flexibility.
Yeah.
I also think at ezCater, we've been really mindful, in the earlier days, it was work-life balance, and we've kind of flipped that script to life-work balance, where you're in your houses every single day, and it's hard to, differentiate or draw that line because your laptop is always there and accessible. And so I think as an interviewer, but also as an interview panel, to be very mindful of how your culture has evolved and how you're talking about that balance and the awareness that you have, because retention and employee engagement, like everyone is tired, and it's a very competitive market now. So I think that's also a key differentiator that I've seen, at least, and how we're conducting, our interviews, but also I think what candidates are really caring about, and they're not afraid to talk about it. Whereas I think 2+ years ago, the work-life balance was a little bit of that taboo. Do I ask about it? Do I not? And I tell everyone who's interviewing to feel empowered to ask those questions, because it's a two-way street. So that's a notable change that we've seen as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think
I'd say most.
Go ahead, Scott.
I was going to say most of my clients are, do hybrid models. The one thing I'm not seeing is 100% remote. So if my Boston clients really want somebody who are in the Boston area so that they can be in the office a couple of days a week, or if they need to be, that they're nearby and they don't have to pay huge travel costs to get them to the office.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think it's helped build us a little bit more trust within employees. I think I myself, my employer, I remember a time where I had a colleague who actually had told senior management a few days when there were folks on our team that were leaving 15 minutes out of the office early. And now it's like, it's the same situation. Like if you're not on Slack 24/7 and your manager is wondering where you are, it's, building that trust and having that trust that your employees are going to do the right thing, I think has really changed in the past 2 years. So really interesting.
I also think that there's like the human side of work is really changed, which is like, we work from home. So, my dog barks, my kids come down asking questions. And there is something about that in the beginning, I think was really uncomfortable. You're like, oh, so sorry. Now it's like, you say hi to each other's kids, and it's this really nice thing that we are all, there's like this facade that's kind of been broken down, and we're all in this together. And it's a little bit more comfortable. And I feel like seeing people in their home environment, you get to know them a little bit more. And I think that there's some really great things that we've seen as a result of kind of the work from home hybrid sort of culture.
Yeah, absolutely. If someone has pets, I will stop the meeting and say, hold them up or bring the camera.
I will bring my 50-pound dog on my lap sometimes for meeting. He hates it. But it's all good.
Love that. I love it. Awesome. Well, yeah, very interesting. I think, another question I wanted to get your thoughts on this, Scott, was what are some of the strategies that recruiters are using to attract talent now?
Sure. So I use a blend of techniques, the old-fashioned ones and some newer ones as well. There are so many places right now to connect with great talent, which means as a job seeker, there are a lot of ways to be seen. So for me, the old-fashioned stuff, still works. So I post on various job boards. I review resumes that come in through our website, but I do a really rapid scan of those, maybe 30 seconds max, and I'm looking for very specific things that my clients are looking for. But mostly what I'm doing is networking. So I'm talking with people who are in my field of recruitment, so the candidates who my clients would hire for one of their open positions. And I'll talk to people, even if I don't have a current position for them, because I'm always trying to build that talent pipeline. And I can't tell you how many times, over the years, I've had memorable conversations, and I go back, whether it's weeks, months, or even years later, to be able to reconnect with those candidates. For me, I do a lot of work in LinkedIn, and I'm writing very targeted emails to candidates. When I'm finding, I don't regurgitate the job description, responsibilities and requirements. I'm really kind of trying to find the exciting things that are going on at the company, especially from a culture standpoint. I'm trying to highlight characteristics and capabilities of the hiring manager that bring that person to life. And I spend a lot of time on Glassdoor trying to find positive reviews and highlight them for prospective candidates. I'm always asking if somebody's not interested in making a move. I'm always asking for recommendations and referrals. And then, lastly, social media have, so many important tools to connect and attract candidates. I'm trying to use creativity as much as possible to drive engagement and to break through some of the clutter and not, post, just, open jobs. I write content about resume and interview tips, and I've done my last 4 posts have featured my mother and her dating life and how.
I love those, by the way, Scott. I really do. I was reading it on LinkedIn yesterday. I love it.
So, and it's been interesting because it's yielded an incredibly high rate of engagement, and I'm hearing from the kinds of candidates and clients who I want to work with. So those are kind of top level, what I'm seeing.
Yeah. Panelists, anything else?
If I can add on to that, I mean, I think, as someone who's focused on in-house, and Paige and I are kind of, I think, different than Tim and Scott in that. Because it's such a candidates market, there's a lot of pressure to work really fast, move really fast, and kind of take recruitment and make it very transactional. And I think, the idea really needs to be that it's all about those relationships. So something that Scott said is those conversations where you may not have a job that's a good fit for this person. It really is right now, more than ever, super important to slow things down and really, I think, be really transparent and open and have those conversations and listen, because the candidates will tell you a lot of things, what they're looking for, what that ideal role really looks like. And, there's still too many recruiters out there who aren't listening and waiting to get their next word in. And, I'm looking for social media. They're like, great, I have a search marketing role. That's fantastic for you. It is really important to listen to them, I think, and take that pressure off. When candidates are always, are asking, well, when do you need to hear back from me on? And I say, I'd love to hear back from you tomorrow. but take your time because this is a big decision. And I'd rather you take a week and come back with a well thought out decision than give me an answer tomorrow and leave in 3 months. So it's, we are very much swinging against the current. I'm going to use so many cliches tonight. I'm so sorry in advance, but we are definitely swimming against the current so much in this market as recruiters that we just need to remember that we are human and we are dealing with people's lives. Take it, kind of take that step back and, and build those relationships. It's super important.
I also think on the candidate side, if you're interviewing to feel empowered, and sometimes that's challenging in an interview process, but to feel empowered to ask those maybe hard to answer questions because it's your discovery process as well. And I think that it's also very revealing around how a company is operating and thinking about employee and candidate experience, because that's a pivotal part of just the company operation in general and long-term retention. So just to kind of put a quick note in, I think don't be afraid to ask those sometimes hard to ask questions during an interview.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mentioned earlier we're having AMA Boston's having a DEI event coming up, and I think DEI is a topic that has been top of mind for a lot of employers as well, and how to do that right, not making it a check the box activity, but making it a, hey, let's really make sure we're hiring the right people, a diverse pool, and being inclusive in the decision making that our senior leadership is considering. So, Paige, I think we had a good discussion about this and would love to get your thoughts. What are some actionable steps that companies should take to create a more inclusive hiring process?
Yeah, and it's a good question. And I think every company is trying to evolve and iterate and get better. And I know that ezCater, we're constantly reflecting on this, but I think at the core, a lot of it revolves around building equitable hiring processes and interview processes. So, you don't want to say oh, this is Matt's interview and it's going to change for every single candidate that comes through, because that leads to a lot of biases creeping in and it's not an equitable process for anyone. And so what we've really done is created this more thorough process around defining these key focus areas. So, for instance, focus area A will always be around collaboration and, A/B testing skills, something like that, followed by a series of core interview questions. And so, if Tim can't make this interview and John's popping in, it's not changing. And every single candidate, presumably who goes through that process, is going to have the same experience and be qualified in the same way. And it also gives the company confidence that they're going to hire the right person for their job. I also think that we have to be really mindful of the interview panel itself. And I've taken away learnings from this time and time again, where candidates aren't going on site to an office anymore. So they can't get the energy. They can't see people. They can't talk to, random folks in the hallway like they might have used to. It's all happening in this kind of siloed Zoom screen that feels a little bit impersonal. And so I think that when you're choosing your interview panel, one, to make sure, of course, the panel is prepared, always be selling as much as you're qualifying. Every single person, I think, should walk away wanting to work for your company, whether you're going to hire them or not, because it's a brand impression. It's important. And they're dedicating the time to meet with your organization. I also think being mindful of the interviewer's backgrounds. And so, that could be different levels of experience in your interview panel. That could be different departments, different, just core experiences. Like, say your company really prides itself on hiring folks outside of industry, or those who don't have corporate experience, will showcase that and let them tell their story. And I think that helps with that feeling of inclusivity and also acceptance that a lot of people are seeking, right? Especially if they're looking to break into a new space. So those are kind of the core things that we're doing. Of course, we're doing a lot more, but I think that's like the baseline of some of the most important actions that you can take when defining an interview process or panel.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think for us in media is not a very diverse industry. Boston especially is, way too many people in media look like me. And that's something that we're working really hard on changing. And it's very manual. I think to Paige's point, I mean, creating a more behavioral, hard word to say today, interview style is really great for creating a much more level playing field for different types of candidates with different backgrounds. For us in media, what we've partnered with some folks, but it's become a really manual piece. And we, before the pandemic, we said we were always going to have, for every role that we're working on, diversity represented within the candidate mix. And that was working a lot easier before the pandemic started, but it continues to be something that's really manual, that, we can close roles in a week. And, a lot of times we've talked to hiring managers and said, look, we can close this role in a week, but that's not going to allow us to really deliver a diverse group of candidates. Give me 3 weeks. And, let's kind of see how that goes. That's been really successful for us. We hired, I think last year, about 43% ethnically diverse candidates. So out of about 400 hires, it's an impactful number. And, part of that is getting the buy-in from, from everybody, hiring managers, et cetera. And I think diversity also, I think someone's kind of asking this. When we look at diversity, we look at ethnic diversity, we look at first generation college, we look at LGBTQ, really everything. And for us, I think diversity really means different voices, different backgrounds. So when everyone's sitting in a room together, not everybody is telling the same story. And I think it's, again, manual and hard work, but so worth it. And when you start to see real changes, it obviously helps to hire more people, because the last thing of DE&I that we're seeing more and more is the B, belonging. And it's really hard to add that B in without first kind of diversifying, but you have to retain those people. So what do we do to make sure that, new hires feel like they belong? So it's employee resource groups are super important, and things like that, that make sure that once the heavy lifting of getting, more diverse voices in the office, how do we keep them? And I think that's almost one of the greater challenges that we're facing right now.
Yeah. I love the point you just made about belonging too, because that goes beyond just being inclusive. It's really making folks feel like they have a voice that needs to be heard within the company. So, I think what I'm hearing a lot from you, Josh, and the rest of you is this is a process that's worth taking time and investing in. It goes back to that kind of age-old saying, hire slow, fire fast. And that really goes back to, I think just making sure you're positioning your company for success in the long run. So I love that. That's great. Another question I wanted to ask you guys is around how do you kind of stick out in such a large pool of candidates now, right? I mean, Scott was just saying it earlier that social media is a tool now that everyone in recruiting is using to find those candidates that they want to bring into their companies or whoever they're hiring for. So Tim, I'd love to hear from you on this. What can candidates be doing either on their resumes or on LinkedIn or whatever social media platforms to ensure that employers are clicking on their profiles, or they're going to pull their resume from that 100-page long pile of resumes they have on their desk?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I will say, and I would imagine most everyone here will agree with me, but it's an unprecedentedly good time to be looking for a new job, because it feels like every company is hiring and there's a ton of opportunity out there. But still, to your point, like how do you stand out from anyone who's actively or even passively looking for a new opportunity? I think some of these things you've probably heard before. Hopefully you have, because I don't know if any of this is necessarily new news or groundbreaking, but I always say a resume is not, it's not a job description, right? And I think it's surprising. You'll still see people mid-career, later career, not just junior, early career people. Their resume reads like a job description. It doesn't really have measurable results. It doesn't have, some of that specific stuff that a recruiter wants to see. I mean, a recruiter can see your job title and usually have a pretty good idea of what it is that you do. So they're really looking for what impact did you have in that role? And I think it's sort of the old axiom, the three things that, that you've done either to, one, make the company money, two, save the company money, or three, improve a process, right? Like those are things that you want to get across. And, some roles are harder to, just throw metrics, although marketing roles, actually, especially like demand gen and whatnot, like there should be plenty of metrics and success measures that you can put on there. But even other things, just accomplishments, like more of an accomplishments-based resume. And I think, of course, there'll probably be a day not too far in the future where, resumes are completely passé and it's, all on LinkedIn, and we're not totally there, but I feel like we're kind of maybe already there already. But resumes are still important. They still get looked at. They still are, part of the process. But I think for LinkedIn, and people have different opinions on this. My opinion on LinkedIn is it's hugely important, number one. But number two, I think that LinkedIn, you'll hear some people say it should kind of mirror your resume. I've heard people say it should have more detail about your positions than your resume has. I kind of disagree with that. I think LinkedIn should be, it should have probably less detail than your resume, but still be descriptive. I think, for an example, like we do a fair amount of recruiting for agencies, and you get an agency role and they're looking for somebody from another agency that has worked on, say, a similar type of account, or at least a similar sector of accounts. And you'll start looking at LinkedIn profiles of people at other agencies, and they'll list their job title. They may even list some of their responsibilities on LinkedIn, but they'll give you no inkling on sort of like what types of accounts they've worked on. So I think it is beneficial, not just for recruiters, because obviously it's selfish of me to say, well, the more information is better so I can assess you. But I think it's good for the candidates too. I mean, put a little bit more detail on there, and you're going to there could be something on there that's going to, stand out to the recruiter, that's going to give them, increased odds of getting in touch with you because they can tell that you're, a better match for the role. So I don't think you have to go overboard with the level of detail on LinkedIn, but I do think, the more descriptive, the better.
And sometimes when building out your resume or your LinkedIn profile and you are actively looking, it's helpful to kind of pick a few core jobs that you're interested in and just look at the terminology that the job description is using. I'm not saying to, copy and paste it, but, I think especially if we are searching on LinkedIn, and to Tim's point, if your LinkedIn profile isn't built out, like the specific Boolean search or search string that we're trying to leverage might have these keywords, and your profile might not pull up because of that, if you leave them out. So I've always recommended to folks that that's kind of an easy trick, I guess, or tip. And someone had asked about volunteer experience in your resume and building that out, especially if you're kind of developing your experience. And I think volunteer experience is fantastic and should be highlighted, and it can be highlighted in a similar way that experience would be on your resume. Showcase who you're volunteering with, what the responsibilities entail, the hours that you're putting into it, because that's a big commitment. And obviously there are more granulars that you can go into, but yeah, I think anyone early stage, or whether you've been volunteering for years, I think that's something, it's an interesting talking point about you and what you're passionate about. So certainly showcase that.
Yeah, I'd agree with everything Tim and Paige said. Kind of a couple of things from me, like just don't screw up and you'll be way ahead of everyone else. 75% of the job applicants we see have some kind of an error. They're either, I can't tell you how many people have the title of manger. You can't be your own proofreader all the time. So share it with somebody else. If I see a resume of somebody who's in Colorado, I probably am not going to look at it because my clients are in Boston. But if somebody says that they are either open to relocating to Boston or planning on it, that gets my attention. And then kind of the last thing is, really look at what you put out, on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, because if I'm not checking it, my clients are, and one questionable post could really kind of sink your candidacy.
Yeah, and I think just to kind of add on, I actually am a big believer in when looking at LinkedIn versus resume, and I always say LinkedIn can be your novel, your resume is your Cliff's Notes. So I actually feel like go ahead, like build out your LinkedIn, put as much content as you want in there. Someone asked, is there such thing as too many keywords? Before I was in recruiting, I was in paid search. Keywords are the best. But I think it's important because, there's a lot of different ways to search resumes. Put more information out there, especially if you are looking for a job. That is how we find you. And to Tim's point, we do a lot of pharma advertising. Just about half of our business is in the pharma and healthcare space. So when I'm looking at people at other agencies, I want to see clients. I want to see pharma. I want to see healthcare. So go ahead and put that out there. And look, your LinkedIn page as your resume may evolve a little bit based on if you're looking for a job or not, besides just the open to work, kind of put the sign out. You may, when you're looking for a job, you may want to add a little additional content. You may want to go a little bit more keyword heavy. That's how recruiters are going to find you. Go ahead, have some fun.
Yeah, I love all those points. One thing, I thought was really interesting when we had our initial kind of planning call for this meeting that we talked about was whether or not you should apply for a position, even if you don't fit all the requirements that are listed, right? And what we're hearing now is how competitive this job market is, and it's a candidates pool. So, I think you made a really interesting point about this when we chatted for at first page was, should somebody who maybe they don't necessarily have all those skills and requirements and things that an employer is asking for in the job description, is it still worth, going ahead and submitting your resume or pressing apply on LinkedIn, or even, if you're a student also, what if you are looking for that entry-level role? If you don't have an internship, should you apply? Would love to get your thoughts on both of those.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because I think a lot of employers are trying to evolve their job descriptions and make them more accessible and I guess reachable to a variety, like a larger audience, instead of trying to be really exclusive. But my short answer is like, yes, I think you should still apply. But going into it a little bit deeper, I think you have to be strategic in the approach. I've kind of seen it happen on two different, I guess, spectrums here. So like one, you have folks who are very targeted and like know what they want to do, and they will apply to, a core set of marketing roles, for instance. And then you have others who are still kind of in that discovery process, and maybe you're just really excited about a company or opportunities. And so like one day they'll apply for a data science role, the next day a product marketing role, the next day they want to work in finance. And I've seen this multiple times. And I think that it's that can be a little bit of a red flag, to be honest, for both the hiring manager and the recruiter, because we want to understand, okay, like where your passion area is, what do you want to do, and have you figured that out? So my recommendation for those who are maybe on the fence about applying is do apply if your experience in some respect aligns. And if you get rejected, by the way, I always think it's okay to ask for an exploratory call. I'm not saying every recruiter will be able to offer it up, but I know at least at ezCater, we really try and keep that door open. And even if it's just a nice email exchange with someone who really cares and is passionate about our company and what we're doing, that resonates, and we'll remember that. And I've had relationships for years with folks who maybe they were rejected, and 2 years later we called them up and there's alignment and they're working for us. So there's certainly a full circle there, but again, I would be really cautious around blanketing applications and, you know, talk to mentors, join different groups and kind of learn about the space before, just so it doesn't hurt you in the application process. In terms of internships, and maybe I'm biased in this respect because I myself didn't have a ton of internships. I remember graduating and feeling really anxious about that, and then trying to figure out how I was going to make it in the world with all these other students. And my biggest takeaway is it doesn't matter, and maybe people have a controversial opinion over that, but I think that, of course, internships are beneficial because it gives you the chance to learn new functions and explore different companies and what you like and what you don't. But honestly, when we're hiring, and even myself as a hiring manager for my team, I'm looking for core qualities around, you know, kindness and collaboration, ability to learn quickly, and a passion and openness and eagerness. And I think if you have those key qualities or tenets, like, you can learn, and I feel confident with your ability to learn. So I think as a new graduate or someone who's trying to break into the market, don't get analysis paralysis and overanalyze and think, oh, if I don't have this internship, I'm not worthy of applying. And don't be afraid to tap people on the shoulder and have those conversations, because networking truly goes a long, long way. And that's what I did in my first role. I networked like crazy, and it led me to recruiting. So, you know, it's beneficial.
And I think a good recruiter is going to take someone who applied for this role and understand that they are actually a better fit for this role. I mean, there were so many times that we got a resume that I, you know, set up a screen and we'll get right into it. Say, hey, you know what? I loved your background. Not for this role. I think actually you may be better here. And, you know, candidates really appreciate that. And again, it's the authenticity that we can offer, which is, you know, that real conversation, and pointing someone in a different direction to a different role. It goes a long way, and you can already start building that relationship. And I love those conversations because it's a little bit of career coaching, in addition to, you know, kind of my regular job, trying to fill roles. And again, those are great conversations. You really get to know somebody when you are kind of helping them rethink what they applied for, what they're really looking for, and you really understand exactly what their ideal role looks like. And for me, you know, one of the questions I always ask candidates is, what does your ideal role look like? Tell me about it. And those sort of next thing, whatever they say, helps me to sell the existing role or take a step back and pivot over to a different direction.
Yeah, and one quick thought too, regarding cover letters and emails and such, I think cover letters can be impactful. I think it depends how you write them, and sometimes less is more, and being succinct and, you know, I think even personalized. I mean, maybe this is, you know, a product of just where I've worked, but I kind of prefer the cover letters that have more of a voice of a person behind them, and they're just a little bit more whimsical versus being like very stiff and this is my experience and this is why you should hire me. And I do pay attention to them, and it has prompted some really great conversations. And I also think that if you know who the potential hiring manager is, again, you have to approach this with a sense of like awareness and personalization, but you know, reach out to the hiring manager and say hello and express interest. I know our director of sales, when we're hiring for BDRs, he absolutely loves it when someone pings him directly, and whether they have BDR experience or not, he has a conversation. So it does truly resonate with people. So I think that continue to use those methods and just be tactful about it.
I love that. That's great. We're running a little bit up on time, so I want to just make sure we get enough time for audience questions, because we have a ton of great questions here in the chat, and I'm sure folks probably want to come up to ask our panelists some questions they're thinking of. So I think real quick, we'll go through the chat to help me kind of guide through that. We have Sherry from the programming team on the call tonight. So Sherry, were there any good questions you thought would be good to bring up right now for the panelists to answer that they haven't already?
Yeah, they've answered some of them, but I think there was one question that where someone had made a comment that they thought that for maybe the, entry level to mid-level, it was more competitive. It was, a candidate's market. And then maybe for director and above, sometimes it wasn't. And I was just curious if the panel thought that that was the case, or if, maybe it could be by industry.
I mean, I think it's definitely by industry, but I know, I think in terms of media, when I'm talking to like a VP candidate or a director candidate, they're still coming to us with, probably 4 or 5 different opportunities, and still have, by the time we get to offer, sometimes 3, 4 offers. So again, that's media. That's the industry that I am, work in. So I know the best. But I think, I think it is still very much a candidate's market at that higher level.
Yeah, I would agree with Josh. I mean, I just haven't seen it to be different at the more senior levels. There seems to be, again, people getting, if they're active, they're usually having multiple conversations and, usually, or sometimes getting multiple offers. So yeah, I've seen something similar for sure.
Arguably, there could be like a slight difference in terms of like frequency of those jobs. Just if you think about it, at least in like the space that I work in tech, a company is going to have a handful of directors and maybe, 3 or 4 VPs, C-suite, the same thing. So I do think that the higher that you get, right, it can be a little bit more, it's not slower pace, it's just longer interview processes, more specific or niche roles and less of them. But I just closed a C-level role last week. I'm working on a VP role right now, and both candidates in process had between 2 and 4 final opportunities and offers. So I think it's just about syncing with the right company at the right time, and probably in the right space.
Great. Sherry, were there any other ones that you saw that stood out?
Yeah, there's one interesting one. Someone asked, what's the elephant in the room competency that's excessively scarce these days?
I would say anybody willing to go into the office 5 days a week. Is that a competency?
Yeah, I think these days it is.
I mean, I think, again, I'm going to speak to kind of what's the competency that's tough to find. Within media, we lost a year of promotions. If you really think about the first year of the pandemic, and again, and maybe this is other industries too, probably is. I can only speak, from the industry in which I work in, but we lost a year of people moving up in their roles. And where I think the biggest impact on that was the kind of junior folks. So, like a level 2 role. So for us, planners, buyers, social media specialists, paid search specialists, that is really, it was pre-pandemic, those levels were tough to find. Now, because we lost a year of those entry-level people moving up, the industry now is going after what we used to take 18 months of experience on. People are now looking at 8 months of experience. And that is, making those sort of searches really, really challenging. There's less people in those, kind of in those roles. And as a result, it's a scarcity.
Yeah. We had a few questions here around, and I think we touched on this briefly, but just around the importance of cover letters and if they still matter today, if those are still going to help you kind of stick out. Any additional thoughts on that from anyone?
I mean, I have a point of view on it. I think that cover letters and resumes don't always travel together, and people spend a lot of time customizing a cover letter and then using a very generic resume. That I always advise candidates to kind of really beef up their summary and make sure that it aligns exactly with the job that they are going after. somebody can write a cover letter with 3 or 4 quick bullets, but I would invest the time on really tailoring the resume for the job.
Yeah, I would definitely echo that. I agree with Scott. Definitely put the time into the resume, because either they may not be traveling together, or a lot of recruiters will just go right to the resume. So yeah, I would say cover letters are at least, again, in my point of view on it, is definitely put the focus on the resume.
I don't look at them very much. I look at a resume first. I would say the best use of a cover letter, in my opinion, is if you are really kind of making a pivot in your career, or applying for a role that your experience speaks to, but maybe not so clearly. I think that's where a cover letter is really great, is explaining your story of, hey, I did this. This is why I'm looking to move into this. And sometimes, a good resume of someone who may be left of center in terms of type of candidate, if there's a cover letter there, I may say, I'm curious to know why this person left nursing and is looking to get into media. I mean, and we hired someone a couple of years ago who had spent 15 years in nursing. And it's an interesting pivot into, client services and media. But at the end of the day, that bedside manner translates 100% into client management. So that's where I think a cover letter is great. The one thing I will say, and I think Scott and Tim and Paige have touched on this a little bit, you can make a lot of mistakes in that cover letter. So customization is always great, but if you're customizing, make sure that you are taking away some of that customization, or making sure that you are customizing it to every sort of job you're applying for. I remember years ago getting a resume for social media, and the objective on the resume was, I want to be in real estate, and it's like, well, okay, goodbye, and those cover letters, there's a lot of rooms for the wrong company name in there, the wrong industry, typos. So limit your opportunity for errors. And again, I think to everyone's point, focus on that resume and use that objective. You can customize that, but again, make sure that you are keeping an eye on that when you're sending it out.
I also think be mindful of the job. Maybe this is too obvious, but like if you're in communications or content marketing or in some kind of marketing function, I know that resonates with the marketing teams I've worked with and hiring managers. So, I think it also just depends on the type of role that you're applying for.
Absolutely. Kimberly had a good question here, and Caitlin was kind of wondering a similar thought. Is there a pro or con for a candidate submitting an application on a corporate website versus LinkedIn?
I think it depends on what the applicant tracking system that the corporation is.
Probably.
Which, like, recruiters here know what I'm talking about, but I personally think that LinkedIn is a better place to apply. I think that the LinkedIn platform is really easy to review candidates. So I tend to go there for the bulk of my hiring. I don't like our applicant tracking system. I don't think it's user friendly. So, but that's us. We do look at both, but I know that my team tends to focus more on LinkedIn applications.
Yeah, I have found, it personally hasn't impacted me. I think either way, most candidates are like funneled into our applicant tracking system just fine. But what I have noticed actually, and as salary laws are changing, we started to put our salary bands, our national range in the job descriptions itself. And so some of these details sometimes don't always pull to LinkedIn. So just from a candidate perspective, maybe always cross-reference the job on the careers page of the website itself, just to ensure you're not missing any key details, but it's more of a tip, I guess. Awesome. Yeah, and Caitlin actually made a point. Sometimes they're not updated. Sometimes LinkedIn is delayed in pulling jobs or they close. So yeah, another reason to cross-reference the careers page.
Yeah,
I would say apply both. I don't think you're going to get dinged for applying in both places.
No.
which may contradict something we said earlier today. But
Great. Did anybody want to come off mute as well to ask any questions? If you didn't drop them in the chat or anything, if you do, feel free to jump off now and voice any thoughts or questions you have.
I actually have a question about Paige, what you were just talking about salary expectations.
Mm-hmm.
I'm seeing more and more companies asking right away what your desired salary is. And to me, even though it might be detailed in the job description, you know, what they offer in terms of 401k or PTO or what have you, it's still, to me, that feels more like a conversation. As opposed to right off the bat, like, this is what I want. And, you know, I might not know if that's what, you know, it's like kind of like I need to know more, but I guess I'm curious is when they're asking for that information, are people automatically weeded out if they put an answer that isn't, you know, syncing up with whatever that amount is, if it's not listed in the job description?
Yeah, it's such a hard one too. And I think this is where like the recruiting partnership is so important, because as a recruiter, I want to make it very clear, like, hey, I'm not here to silo you into a corner. Like, this is a discovery process that you're running. And so the more you learn, the better informed you'll be. I think I can answer this in a few different ways, but I think from a candidate perspective, it's perfectly fine to say, hey, I need to gather more data points, and I would feel more comfortable, you know, chatting with you, understanding the role and leveling, and then asking them around the compensation band that they've scoped. Every recruiter should be able to at least give you kind of a starting point. And then I think if you feel comfortable, you don't have to negotiate to a specific number, but you can say, okay, for me to have this make sense, I really need to be at X and above, and that's what I'm considering. Or I'm interviewing for roles in X, Y, and Z range. But I would say, like, one, like, you don't have to tie yourself to a set number at the beginning. And I also think it's important, like, compensation is going to be really, really key for everyone, but something I love to hear when candidates are considering new roles is, like, compensation is factored into a slew of other things that are really important in a job process. And the only reason I say that is because if you're only salary driven, you're going to get countered. You know, there's like a slew of things that will happen, and, you know, maybe it doesn't make sense for you to move in your role. I don't know. So I hope that's helpful. I know I kind of talked in a circle, but
No, it is.
Just having the power to, like, ask that question and not feel like you have to say a number under pressure.
No, that is very helpful. Thank you. I appreciate that.
The other side to that is, you know, and it's funny, there's sometimes when we'll have candidates that have been pre-vetted, they're high-level referrals, and the first conversation I have with them is literally, hey, I'm Josh. What are you looking for in terms of comp, right? And it's a super awkward, and I always joke about it, like, you've never met me before, and I'm going to ask you, like, a really personal question, right? It's the sort of how much you're looking for, how much you're paying is super uncomfortable, and it's uncomfortable for us too. Like, I promise you, we don't love talking about money. And again, we just right, it's horrible, and it's always awkward.
Mm-hmm.
But we sometimes ask that comp question, and sometimes I will be honest, sometimes I'll ask it really early in a conversation, and the reason I'm doing that isn't because I want to talk money. I just want to make sure that we're not $100,000 off.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And, you know, and Caitlin, and it happens, and it happens more so now. We have people coming out of college looking for crazy numbers.
Right.
You know, and we don't anticipate that. So I'm not necessarily thinking that they're going to be asking for 50 grand over what we're offering.
Right.
It happens frequently lately, but much more on that sort of director and up, right? Whereas I just want to make sure that we're in the ballpark, because what I don't want is comp to not get discussed and get pushed off. The team loves someone and they're like, let's go to offer.
Right.
And then now we're having that compensation conversation, and I'm like, whoa, we're not even in the same ballpark. You know, now we've wasted the
Time.
candidate's time, the
Yes.
team's time,
And dreams.
my time's not wasted because that's my job, right? So, so that's why I think comp is so important, and it's not necessarily tying that final number down. It's just making sure that we're close enough.
And also have your baseline ask. I think, you know what you need to be making, at least at the lowest level, right? For it to make sense. So I think you can frame it in that way as well.
Thank you. That's super helpful.
I think we got time for one last question here, guys. I see Jeffrey posted a question in the chat saying, when would a company make the decision to use a recruiter versus their internal HR staff?
Is that like an external recruiting firm, or like hiring a recruiter as part of the HR team, Jeff?
Actually, this is Jeff Social. How you doing, everyone? It's basically like if you have a critical role, and sometimes you do have your own recruiting staff, HR, but it's a hard role to fill. Like, when will you decide to go outside to an external recruiter, and pay the fee, like 20 to 25%, whatever the fee is? I mean, that's a tough one, but
it is. I mean, I'll tell you, my recruiting team is 10 people. And we use several outside firms. And we've never done it in the past. But we, in the last 2 years, because of this market, no matter how large my recruiting team is, it always helps to have other people out there. So I think this sort of market, all rules are off, and you're seeing more and more companies, I think, going external in addition to their internal team. It's just, we have to get roles filled, and it's a full court press, I think, to do it. So you need to get a little bit more aggressive and cast a much wider net and use more partners probably than you've ever used in the past.
thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, we are at the top of the hour, so I do want to be able to wrap and give everyone time back in their evenings here. But thank you so much to our awesome group of panelists for putting on this discussion tonight. And thank you all for being here and participating. This was fantastic. We do have some upcoming events. We will have our next one in June, I believe. It's going to be June 8th. We have a bit of a hiatus in May. And then we'll have our DEI event either beginning in June or middle of June. So we'll have that on our website soon. Also, please take our post-event survey after this. It'll be emailed to all of you that registered, and give us some feedback. Let us know what we did well. Let us know what we can improve on. Let us know what future events you want to see from the chapter, so we can continue to put on these awesome events for you guys. So thank you all very much, everyone. Have a great rest of your evenings. And
thanks, everybody. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.